Welcome back to Speak Out, Stand Out. I'm Elizabeth Green, and today's guest is Jan Talen. Jan is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and she uses her training and her own experiences to help families stay strong and connected. And Jan, we're really excited. I know you've got some great things to share with us today. Thanks for being here.
I'm so glad to be here. I love families, I love teenagers, and I love it when they really click together.
And that, as anybody with a family and teenagers specifically know that is not always the case.
No.
So I am thrilled that you're going to be giving us some tips today. Now, I know you focus a lot on marriage, and for anybody listening, if you've listened to this podcast before, we talk about ways to build communication skills in our kids. However, a big part of the way we do that is the way they see us communicate with others.
Yeah.
So we are talking more about how we communicate with our partners today, but this absolutely still applies to building those same skills in your kids. So Jan, just first and foremost, give us a quick background. How did you get to where this is this is your calling in life?
Yeah, no, you're right. Calling in life, my passion. People say, "Why aren't you retired?" Because I like what I do. Marriages have always fascinated me, and so very early on, when there was a brand new first time being offered in California a marriage and family therapy license. And I hopped on that train and stayed in private practice, working with marriages, working with families, working with individuals for over 35 years. I paused the daily meeting with clients to move into the online world, partly because only 3 to 4% of people ever seek a therapist.
Oh, wow.
But a whole lot of us could use knowledge that a therapist has.
Right.
And so here I am. I'm cheap. Look, you're listening for free, and I'm going to give you professional information that's well-researched and well-known and usable. So I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to have you here. And so obviously, there are a lot of different facets of relationships and marriage. And then you throw parenting in there, which completely just flips everybody's life upside down. And anybody who's listening, obviously, if you're a parent, you've been through this, you understand that. But one of the biggest challenges, I think, comes from communication or lack thereof. Would you agree that tends to be the root of the issue?
Yeah, I adjusted just a little bit in this way. We are always communicating because we're either doing it verbally, that's 20% of our communication, and stats will give us 3 or 4% plus or minus there, but we'll call it an even 80 for our minds. And the other, or we'll call it an even 20 for verbal. And then we'll give 80% of it to tone, eye contact, body stance, choice of words. So the words can be fine, but how they are said makes such a difference. And so all of that nonverbal is a huge, huge part of communication. We're always communicating.
Yeah.
What people are reading from it, and a lot of it, people like, oh, that's just mom. She just does that. And so they gloss over it and they let it go. But we're always communicating. So sometimes we pick up on things our kids didn't think they were sending and aren't aware of it. And sometimes our kids are picking up on stuff from us that we didn't think we were sending, but our kids have picked up on it. Yeah. And being able to slow down and say, what's happening here? And you can hear me, I'm slowing down. What's happening here? That curious question, different than a what's happening here kind of thing. Those are different. Listen to my tone, same words.
Yeah.
You listen to the tone and the approach, and that helps the other person respond in a way, hopefully, that we're able to meet in the middle, sort of with accuracy about what are we really talking about.
Yeah. Well, and there are several things here I want to dig into. But one, the way you just gave that same sentence, same words, but in a different way, that's something that we teach in our classes when we're talking about speech writing and how you just change the emphasis on one word, it changes the entire meaning. And we give them a simple sentence and they have to emphasize each word differently, and
Yes.
every time it changes it. So that's easy to think about in the world of, I want to get this point across in my speech and I'm preparing in advance. How do we actually do that in real time, especially maybe in the heat of a moment when we're overstimulated and frustrated? And, how do we get our brains to stop and think about that?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say to get your brain to stop is to take a really, not a roll your eyes breath, but a really deep breath and hold it and blow it out. Now, don't blow it out and roll your eyes because your body language is going to throw it all off. You need to have some good oxygen in your brain, and you have to have the CO2 out of your brain for your brain to function well. Okay, can I talk about Dan Siegel and hand brain for a
Sure.
minute?
Sure.
Okay, so Dan Siegel writes books about young children and development. This is going to be true as we grow and our teenagers mature. So Dan Siegel will say, this is our brainstem, our hand coming up, and this is our brainstem coming into our head. This is the core of our brain when we're born, and I'm sorry, that's a really ugly thumb, but sorry, I just saw that. This is our emotional base that comes into our brain. This is how we are born without these four fingers: brainstem, core of our brain, and emotional access. As we grow, 2, 3, 4 years old, these fingers start to grow. But they're not, see, look, they're still not connected to your emotions. They're up here. You know those things that fly around in the wind? Advertisement things that look really funny? Buy me, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
That's what these are until a person is 4 or 5. They're sort of just floating around in your brain. They're attached. By the time we're 4 or 5, they start to come this way and they start to wrap over the emotions. Now think of this as your brain hugging each other. This is logic and knowledge. And now logic and knowledge can talk to emotions. When we become stressed, when there's too much carbon dioxide, meaning we're highly anxious or angry, those two will almost always go together, we flip our lids. Poof! Emotion stays intact and inflamed, but our logic is unavailable. It is flying in the wind. It takes 20 minutes. Cortisol has to go down, adrenaline has to go down. These guys start to relax. Now we might be able to problem solve. This is not for two, I mean, this is true for 2, 3, 4-year-olds, but it's also true for 12, 14, 16, and 40, 42, and 44-year-olds. It doesn't change.
Wow.
So when you are ramped up, saying, I need a minute, and going in your bathroom, getting a drink of water, taking some long, slow breaths out to get that carbon dioxide out so that you can clear the adrenaline and the cortisol so that you can think. Now you don't have to make apologies for when you're talking, when you've said something, because it's going to make sense. And when you've paused, you've given your kid time to pause and their brain to come together too.
That's such a great visual. I love that you were able, I hope if you're listening to this, you were able to visualize it. If not, watch it because you can see her hands. It makes very much perfect sense. I mean, we know that we react differently in the heat of a moment, but that there's actual science behind it that explains this is why and this is how you can avoid it is
Yes.
very helpful to know.
Yes, and people say, we got to solve it right now. We got to solve it right now.
Yeah.
Well, if there's fire and big blood, maybe you do. But otherwise, most things can wait. And we parented 4 teenagers, 4 kids, right? They're all alive and well. But they would say the painfulest part was you saying we have to think about it. Because if we didn't know what to do, we didn't do. We paused. A couple of times we paused for 2 days because we asked, what don't we know? And we waited until we answered the questions of what don't we know? I don't know. Did that parent really do that? I don't know. Is that really what happened at school? I don't know. And before I parent, I got to slow down and figure out, what don't I know? And should I figure it out first before I make a parenting decision?
Yeah. I think that's so much easier said than done, but so important. And especially, I always think as a parent, especially if it's a situation where our kids are upset, maybe we're not
Yes,
having an issue between us, but they're having an issue with somebody else, and Mama Bear
yes.
comes out, and I want to fix it,
Mm,
and I want to fix the problems,
yep,
and I don't
yep.
want my child to be upset. And
Hmm.
at the end, so
Yeah.
it's hard in any situation, whether I'm frustrated with my
Hmm.
child or worried, to
Hmm.
pause and like you said, to figure out what I don't know. But
Yeah. So I have a little formula I could share,
yes, please.
um, that I think could work pretty well here. I call it the DNA way to communicate. The D stands for decide what you need to know and do. It's the decide. So this is a pausing space. Consider, wonder, what do I need? I need to decide that before I can move forward in a way that's going to make any sense. Then I have to notice, what do I need? Do I need more calm? Do I need more information? Do I need me and my spouse to be on the same page? Me and my partner, me and my ex, whatever that is, do I need us to be on the same page? Okay. And what do I need to connect with my kid? Okay. Do I need more humor? Do I need their favorite food? Okay. Do we need a car ride or a bike ride? What do I need to connect with them? Because if you're not connected, your communication is not going to matter.
Yeah.
They have to know that you are for them. Okay. Now I figured out what I needed, and I figured out where I want this to go. My deciding, where do I want this to end up? And now I'm going to apply that in a way that fits my kiddo. Okay.
Yeah.
Or if I'm trying to convince my spouse to get on my side, talk to them in a way that will talk to them.
Yeah.
Not what makes sense to you. Talk in a way that makes sense to them. This is the A, it's applying it appropriately.
Yeah.
Okay. When you do that, when you slow down enough to decide, where do I need to go? What do I need to get there? And how am I going to apply it to actually get there? You change the DNA of your family communication.
Yeah. For sure.
Okay.
Because it's not responsive. It's or what's
It's not
it's
reactive.
reactive, right? It's
Yes.
responsive, not reactive. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And that in so many times especially when we're talking to teenagers, their brains are very similar to those 2 to 4 year olds. They're massively rewiring. Logic is not always snapped right down
Yeah.
next to emotions.
Don't we
And
know it?
don't we know it, right? And emotions, when our logic isn't well attached, our emotions can go really wild. Okay, kids want to call it hormones. I call it that the brain is still rewiring. This has to get reattached. Now hormones and logic can talk to each other. We'll be better.
Yeah.
Um,
I love that. And I'm so glad you said that this applies to all of us, because I'm thinking
and,
about my own relationship with my now 17-year-old. And
uh-huh.
we went through a little bit of a rough patch over those
Mm-hmm.
years, 14, 15, 16.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, it's when I started this podcast. And I always say, like, if I'm the only one who ever learned anything from this podcast, it was well worth it, because I learned so much
Yes.
from people like you. And that is one of the key things I think that transitioned our relationship, was me pausing. That is one of the key things that I've heard from people so many times, because I'm responsive. I'm going to respond right now when I get this done. And when I started taking a step back and thinking things through, and mainly calming down, it
Yes.
changed everything. And then as I did that more, he started doing that more.
Mhm.
And it is absolutely, I mean, it transitioned our relationship. So I think I'm glad that you said, like, there's so much to communication outside of just what we say, because it all applies. But if you understand those two things, that pausing and getting yourself together before you respond, or meet your child where they're at, and that you are communicating, even if you're not using words, if you can understand those two things and work on those, that can absolutely make a difference. I know personally.
So can I go back just a little bit farther
Of
into
course.
that? We in that pausing, what you're doing is setting up a space for connecting. So there are three parts that make communication complete. And I'm going to not use the language here that's going to make it totally good, but you're going to make sense out of it. The first part is you have to use connection. And connection is hormonal and relational. Hormonal, meaning we use eye contact, we use tone of voice, we use body stance. Because what we want is for whoever we're talking to not be afraid to look us in the eye, because we have to connect. When our kids are shamed, they're going to look down, they're going to look away, they're going to fidget, they're going to do everything else. That's a sign of shame. And we're going to come back to our kiddos with a whole lot of just gentle, this doesn't mean I'm going to change my parenting decision, but I'm going to approach it in a way that says, you are more important to me than what is right and what is wrong. The relationship is first, and you matter to me. We did this to one of our teenage girls. She was just naughty, naughty, naughty. We had 3 girls and a son. And my husband talked, we decided it's connection. And so, I mean, we could come down hard, but really what we said is, okay, 3 times a week, you get to walk the dog with one of us. And a month later, that girl was all in. All we had to do was insist on connection, because it said, you are important enough for us to be sure. We didn't always walk the dog, but because we were doing this with her, we were walking the dog. Because we wanted to be with her.
Yeah.
Connection matters. And if you don't connect, your communication, your words, your decisions are not going to have the impact. The kid will do it because you're watching. But when you're not watching, they'll go off and do their own thing again.
Right.
It's connection that helps them transition their motives and their desires into a place that's more healthy.
Yeah. I love that. I love it. And so you talked about several different points, and you might have already touched on this, but one of the things that a talking point that you had sent me that really appealed to me was, how do I turn off my retorts? So I come, my business, we teach speech and debate, and so rebuttals and being ready to respond to the other side is hugely important, and something that I'm very, very guilty of in my personal life. So besides the pausing, right, and the DNA application, are there other ways that we can, if you're listening and you're like me and you got to have the last word or you're going to respond, how do we not?
Well, part one, I want you to go back to, what do I desire? Do I desire to be right, or do I desire relationship? And you really have to decide that. I mean, everybody in their heads says, of course I want the relationship. Go check your head.
That's hard.
Go check your heart.
Yeah.
Because wanting the relationship may mean that you have to let some things slide for the sake of the relationship. Okay, I live in Michigan, right? Son wants to wear shorts every day of the year. Do I want to be right? You should wear pants. It's dark -3 out there. Or do I go, oh, well, he doesn't think he's cold. His legs have not frozen off yet. You want to wear shorts? Go ahead, on you. Right?
Right.
Okay, so that's part of it. And then retorting in my world usually means I haven't listened. I just want to get my thought across. And if you can slow down and say, okay, I'm going to hear what they're actually saying, not just their words, but what's their request and what's their need. And it's almost always a connection need and a trust need. Trust me, let me make my own decisions. Okay, because then you can talk about, in my retort is, well, yeah, but that won't work. Okay, you have to do it this way. And the kid is saying, I think that it will be fine if I take the car from me out in the snow. You're North Carolina people, not too much snow except for last year. Okay, well, then instead of retorting, that's not going to work, we just had 12 more inches. Do I go that way, or do I say, I agree, driving in the snow is pretty fun, Tell me how you're going to manage when you get stuck, or tell me how you're going to manage when you have come to a place that the street that you want to go on has too much snow and you have to make a different plan on how to get to where you want to be. Snow plows really aren't out yet. Now I've created a conversation that has problem solving in it, and it helps the kiddo think, do I really want to do this? If I say, a plow truck costs about 150, or a plow truck, a tow truck
The tow truck.
costs about 150 if you got to get pulled out. And that's probably not on my nickel. Oh, yeah, you're probably right about that. And if I say, I will gladly take you and pick you up because I hear going there's important. Okay, now we're working towards some problem solving. He or she can hear that I'm on their side in some way. Okay, and sometimes I'm in my 12 inches of snow, given my reality. Okay, but it could be rain, given the last few months of the world. Okay, or it could just be the group of friends or whatever. Just say, how are you going to manage where I see the trouble spots?
Yeah.
Okay, and the kid will say, there aren't going to be any trouble spots. Like, I didn't say there are or there aren't. I'm asking you to look forward a little bit and to think and to plan.
Yeah.
That's a life skill you have to have your whole life. I'm asking you to use it. I hope you don't have to use it, but I'm asking you to use it with me.
Yeah. Well, and I love what you're saying too, because for me, I'm an explainer too. If I'm going to tell them no, I'm going to give them 15 reasons why I decided no. And what you're doing is the same thing, but you're asking them to come up with these reasons. And that my son would be so much more receptive to that than for me to list off the things. But again, like you said, you're connecting, you're having a conversation. That changes it from a lecture to a conversation, and obviously building those critical thinking skills, which are so important.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and it empowers them.
Yes.
That all of a sudden they're feeling honored and respected because you've said, well, tell me how you would do it. I'm not judging. I'm simply asking, how would you do it? And sometimes my kids pushed back on that. And sometimes I'm like, things I don't know. I want to know how you would do it. Okay. There was a time my son wanted to have 12 or 15 kids out to the cottage. He wanted to have a bonfire, a good group of kids. I wasn't really worried about that. I said, I'm coming. He said, no, you're not. I'm not having my mother out there kind of thing. And I said, yes, I am. I am not going to bother you or your friends. But if the cops show up at the door because somebody complained, I'm taking the rap, not you. And he went, I said, the last thing you need is for a rumor to go home that you guys all had a drunken, crazy party and kept the whole neighborhood awake. I said, I know that's not going to happen, but I can't control, the perception and the rumor.
Right.
If I'm there, I can.
Yes. Yeah.
But that's, so you can sort of hear how I'm parenting that. There's some sacrifice on the part of the parent. But when the kid sees that you're protecting and you're not going to be invasive, I wasn't asking to sit around the campfire. I was going to go and bring out hot chocolate every 22 minutes just to see what's going on. I brought my book and I was going to snuggle down and read my book.
I love it. I love it. But do you have any, I know we're already running low on time. I think this has been a great conversation. Jan, do you have any other tips or tricks that you think like people need to know this before we wrap up today, of ways that we can better communicate with our spouses, our partners, our kids, all the things?
Yeah, the thing we haven't really talked about is that modeling between your spouse, your partner, even your ex is such a powerful way of communicating and helping our kids grow into good habits. If your communication habits could be up-leveled, do that. Do it with your friends. Practice with the radio. I used to practice all the time with the radio. Okay, they'd say something and I'd say, I think in my head, that's stupid. And then I think, now, how would you say that if that was my husband? And I would have to rewrite it. But I practiced the radio, didn't care.
Yeah.
Okay. You practice this with your spouse and with your kids and with your friends. If you need a redo, say redo. Say pause a minute. Let's back up. We can do this better.
Yeah.
Okay. Slow down. Of course, if you need some support from me, then you just connect with me. Okay, we figured that out, and that's not a big sell. That's just I can probably help you get your feet on the ground,
Yeah.
and help you just tweak something. Is often 3 to 5 degrees, and we're back and going. It's not huge, but it's important because 3 to 5 times 5 years of teenager world or more is often 15 to 20 to 30 degrees. Now we're a long ways away.
Mm.
Fix it at your 3 to 5 degrees.
Well, this has really been very enlightening. I so appreciate your time and all of your
Mhm.
insight. And you have freebies that people listening
Mhm.
to can take advantage of. You have a marriage quiz on your website,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so we will link to that. So if you're listening or
Mhm.
watching, the link is right wherever you are.
Mhm.
So you can
Mhm.
pop over to do the
Yeah,
marriage quiz, and then that also follows up with some prompts or some tips. Or tell us just a
yeah.
little bit about that.
Yeah, so the marriage quiz really takes about 2 minutes. And that then gives you a little feedback on where we think your marriage might be. And then from that, you can get 5 emails once a week with a different micro communication. This is a tip on how to stay connected. And these tips are appropriate for anybody. The only thing that I will adjust is because we wrote it first for marriages, is one of them says to give your spouse a 6-second kiss. Adjust that to hugs with your children, please. That's the only thing that I would say. Those come with the option for a free conversation as well. And so that genuinely is a free conversation.
And the 6 second kiss or hug,
Yeah,
I know that there's science behind that, right? It
there
takes
is.
6 seconds to
Yeah, yeah,
release the endorphins in your brain.
it does. Yes.
I had heard that, and
Yeah.
so my 17-year-old, now I make him get after school. He gives me a hug, but I say it has to be a 6 or 7 second hug
And it does.
to make the difference, which I love. But and he goes along with it. So I think that's a great tip, and I'm definitely going to be signing up because I want the other ones as well.
Yes.
So
Wonderful.
Jan, very much appreciate your time. And thank
Uh-huh.
you for listening. Everybody, have a great day.
Thank you.